The world is quietly unraveling, and almost nobody is talking about what's actually happening beneath the surface. A retired military colonel, someone who has spent decades inside the machinery of American warfare, is now saying out loud what most officials refuse to whisper. He's not reading from a teleprompter. He's not softening the edges. And what he's describing isn't a theory, it's a collapse unfolding in real time. Let's start with the thing that should terrify every single person watching this. Australia, a modern, wealthy, developed nation, is reportedly days away from running out of diesel. Not weeks, days. And they have almost no refining capability to fall back on. When a country like Australia starts grinding to a halt, you have to ask yourself, if this is happening there, what's quietly happening everywhere else? The answer, according to this colonel, is worse than most people are prepared to accept. 35% of the world's fertilizer supply has effectively vanished from the market. For those who don't immediately grasp why that matters, fertilizer is the backbone of the modern food system. The green revolution of the last century, the thing that allowed the human population to explode and billions of people to be fed, runs on fertilizer. Without it, you don't just get higher grocery prices, you get famine, not in some abstract future, within 2 years, in multiple parts of the world simultaneously. He says even the United States, with all its resources, is not immune. And yet somehow none of this is leading the news. Before we go any further, if you want to stay ahead of what's really happening in the world, subscribe right now. This channel doesn't do comfortable. We do real. Now let's talk about the military picture because this is where things get particularly disturbing. The colonel is clear. The United States has not achieved a single meaningful military objective, not one. The Iranian Air Force was already barely functional before any of this started. The colonel practically laughs describing it, noting they haven't had a real Air Force since the 1970s. Their navy consisted of a handful of aging frigates, easy to sink, already gone. What Iran does have, however, is something the American military establishment seems almost allergically unable to confront: thousands upon thousands of precision drones, unmanned submersibles, tactical and theater ballistic missiles, and an underground military infrastructure that's been built and expanded over 20 years specifically to survive exactly this kind of bombardment. You can bomb the surface, you can destroy what you can see, but Iran built for this moment, and they're still launching. The colonel describes the American forces being positioned in the region, light infantry, paratroopers, and the picture is almost surreal. These are soldiers organized for a kind of warfare that ended 40 years ago. The colonel recalls how in the Gulf War, General Schwarzkopf refused to drop the 82nd Airborne into Iraq because the risk of anti-air systems wiping them out was simply too high. Instead, they rode into the country on school buses. The same fundamental problem exists today, amplified many times over. Seizing islands in the Persian Gulf, one of the ideas reportedly being floated, wouldn't change the strategic picture at all. Lloyd's of London won't insure ships moving through a war zone. The shipping lanes don't reopen because a few islands change hands. The colonel asks the obvious question that nobody in the room seems to be asking. Then what? And here is where the geopolitical picture starts to truly spiral. Iran isn't alone. Russia has made a windfall, reportedly close to 1 trillion rubles in extra oil revenue above projections, simply because global supply has tightened and prices have surged. Moscow isn't sitting still. It's drilling harder, exporting more, and deepening its relationship with Beijing. At the same time, Iranian oil is still moving, overland pipelines, rail, the Caspian Sea, reaching China through routes that no blockade in the Persian Gulf can touch. China, for its part, is watching. And the colonel believes Beijing is doing the cold calculation every great power does in moments like this. How do we gain maximum advantage while our adversary exhausts itself? Taiwan's leading political figures have reportedly been meeting in Beijing with quiet assurances that war isn't coming, but the colonel reads that differently. He sees it as positioning, patience, the long game. Turkey enters the picture in a way that almost nobody in Western media is discussing. Israeli leadership, including current and former prime ministers, has said publicly that Turkey may represent an even greater long-term threat to Israel than Iran ever did. The colonel doesn't dismiss this. Turkey has the largest army in NATO, well-equipped, well-trained ground forces, missiles, drones, a capable navy, and a population, along with a regional sentiment, that is more hostile to Israel than at any point in living memory. Egypt is described as a pressure cooker with the lid rattling. Its military and its population are furious. The colonel suggests that General Sisi is governing in fear, terrified that any move he makes could be the one that tips his own country into chaos. What happens if Turkey and Egypt decide to act? What stops them? This is the question the colonel keeps returning to, and he doesn't have a reassuring answer. And then there's the man in the center of all of it. The colonel's assessment of the current American leadership is the kind of thing you rarely hear said this directly. He describes a president who was shaped fundamentally by a mentor with three rules: attack without stopping, deny everything that goes wrong, and declare victory no matter what actually happened. Those three rules, the colonel argues, aren't just personality quirks. They are the operational strategy. There is no deeper plan. There is no endgame calculation. There is attack, deny, and declare, which means that even as the metrics fail, even as the bombs don't produce surrender, even as the global economy begins to fracture, the public response will be to claim success, to point at things that were destroyed and call it victory, to dismiss anyone who questions it. The colonel draws a direct parallel to Vietnam-era body counts and destroyed equipment tallies that turned out to be exaggerated or meaningless. The same playbook, different geography. And the nuclear dimension sits underneath all of this like a fault line nobody wants to stand on. Israel has nuclear weapons. Pakistan has said that if those weapons are ever used, Pakistan will respond in kind. Russia has warned against it. China has described it as Israel's end. The colonel doesn't predict it, but he doesn't dismiss it either. What does an exit look like? The colonel's answer is surprisingly clear, even if it sounds politically impossible. An international conference, great powers and small powers, a structured conversation about how to restart the global energy complex, how to manage the Strait of Hormuz going forward, perhaps modeled on the convention that gave Turkey administration of the Bosphorus, which has functioned without crisis for a century. Iran controls most of the coastline. Iran has the greatest stake. That reality doesn't disappear because we refuse to acknowledge it. The colonel argues that the path forward runs through that acknowledgement, not around it. But is the current American leadership capable of making that turn? The colonel's answer is quiet, and it's the most unsettling thing he says. He doesn't think so. What's coming next, economically, militarily, politically, he describes as genuinely catastrophic. And the people who made these decisions, he believes, will not escape the reckoning. The question is how much damage gets done before that reckoning arrives. The world is not on the edge of something. It's already over the edge. The only thing still falling is the distance to the bottom.